Warm greetings to everyone. My name is Dr. Meenu Anand and I teach in the Department of Social Work at University of Delhi, popularly known as the Delhi School of Social Work. Today, we are going to cover in this video the biological aspects of human growth and development. When we say biological aspects, we mean the physiological aspects, the bodily aspects and the physical aspects of growth and development. In the first part of this series, we have covered the biological aspects of 4 stages of lifespan, covering the prenatal phase, babyhood and infancy, early childhood and middle childhood years. In this video, which is part 2 of this topic, we are going to cover the 5th to 8th stages of lifespan development, adolescence, which begins from age 12 to 18 years, 6th stage of lifespan, young adulthood, which covers 18 years to 40 years of age, middle adulthood, commonly known as middle age, which covers the span from 40 to 65 years, and the final stage of lifespan, which is known as late adulthood or also old age, which begins from 65 years till the person is alive. Now, dear friends, let's start with the 5th stage of lifespan, that is the stage of adolescence. Let's recall when we were adolescents. This is known as the transition phase and is a very significant phase in one's life. If we look back, for many of us this stage was probably a stage where we were of course neither adults nor children. It might have entailed some kind of stresses, inner turmoils. The word adolescence comes from the Latin word adolescere, and this means to grow to maturity. Now, this stage is divided into early adolescence from 13 to 16 or 17 years roughly, and late adolescence from 16, 17 up to 18 years. Now, we must note that boys mature later as compared to girls. Now, the growth and development of teenagers' brains and their bodies is remarkable. However, the physical change that most people associate with adolescence is the attainment of sexual maturity. There is a term called puberty, you might have heard. It's a collective term that encompasses all the changes, both seen and unseen, that are needed for reproductive maturity. Puberty begins when the pituitary gland, the gland that controls all the body's other glands, signals a child's adrenal gland to step up its production of androgen. This milestone is known as adrenarche, and this actually occurs around 7 or 8 years of age. Next, the pituitary gland begins to secrete hormones that stimulate the growth of ovaries in girls and testes in boys. As boys and girls grow, these glands secrete hormones that cause the sex organs to develop, testosterone in boys and form of estrogen called estradiol in girls. The pituitary gland also secretes 2 other hormones, the thyroid stimulating hormone TSH and general growth hormone. These, along with adrenal and androgen, interact with specific sex hormones and impact growth. Adrenal androgen, which is chemically very similar to testosterone, plays a particularly important role for girls, triggering the growth spurt and affecting the development of pubic hair. For boys, adrenal androgen is less significant, presumably because boys have already so much of male hormone in the form of testosterone in their bloodstream. These hormonal changes trigger 2 sets of body changes. Number 1, development of sex organs and a much broader set of changes in the brain, bone muscles and other body organs. The most obvious change of puberty are those associated with sexual maturity. We have read about changes in primary sex characteristics which take place, which means growth of testes and penis in the male and of the ovaries, uterus and vagina in the females. The stage begins with the onset of puberty. It's known as menarche for girls, which means essentially the girl's first menstrual period, and for boys it's known as spermarche, a boy's first ejaculation of the sperm. Secretion of hormones take place, growth spurt takes place and there is increase in the body fat. Sexual maturation takes place, which is primary and also secondary sexual characteristics begin to develop. These include breast development for girls, changing voice pitch and beard growth in boys, and growth of body hair for both sexes. These secondary sexual characteristics, they are not directly related to reproduction, however they indicate sexual maturity. Now the sixth stage of lifespan is young adulthood, which begins when the person becomes an adult, 18 years to 40 years. Now this is the age, young adulthood, of responsibilities. This is a time when most people complete their education or vocational training. They start thinking about developing a career, gaining employment, income generation. This is a long span where marriage also takes place, reproductive years, which means childbearing and parenting responsibilities also come. At the same time, one also looks after elderly. So we might say that the person during the young adulthood is often squeezed by the needs of the younger and the older members in their families. In terms of biological development, young adults perform better than the middle-aged or the elderly on every physical measure. As compared to the older adults, adults who are in their 20s and 30s, they have more muscle tissue. There is maximum bone calcium at this stage. There is more brain mass, better eyesight, hearing and sense of smell. The body has greater oxygen capacity and a more efficient immune system. A young adult, therefore, my dear friends, is stronger, faster and better able to recover from exercise or to adapt to changing conditions, for example, changes in temperature or light. There is gradual decline on almost every measure of physical functioning through the years of adulthood. In early adulthood, there is often a balance between physical demand and physical capacity. Most people in early adulthood have ample physical capacity to meet the physical demands. When we look at the reproductive capacity during young adulthood, there is the risk of miscarriage and complications related to pregnancy in a woman who might be bearing a child in her 30s as compared to a woman who is in her 20s. An equivalent change also occurs in fertility, which means the ability to conceive, and this begins to decline after early 30s in a woman and drastically drops during late 30s. Men's reproductive capacity declines as well, but not until the late 30s or early 40s. The sperm count, however, may diminish. The next stage is the seventh stage, which is the middle adulthood, which begins from the age 40 years and continues till 65 years. Now this age of middle adulthood is divided into two: early middle age 40 to 50 years of age and advanced middle age 50 to 65 years of age. For many, the initial years are phase of achievement, because by 40 or 45 years, usually the work might reach at its peak and there are lesser responsibilities related to children who have probably become more independent. However, there is a transition thereafter as the person moves from middle adulthood towards old age with gradual physical, mental deterioration with cessation of reproductive life. There is also compulsory retirement for many people around the age of 60, and we also see that employment opportunities are dwindling for elderly people. Many a times this phase is also known as empty nest syndrome, because usually children at this time become busy with their own career and their personal lives, and the person who is at this stage may begin to feel lonely and isolated, especially the people who are not living with their families. In terms of brain functioning in the middle years, when it comes to creating and processing mental images, the middle-aged brain is just as efficient as the young adult brain. However, another fairly consistent finding is that middle-aged adults' brains, they respond more slowly to cognitive tasks as compared to younger adults. However, researchers have found evidence of declines in processing speed among the middle aged with chronic health problems, for example, diabetes. Now, there is also a term known as climacteric. Now, climacteric refers to years of middle or late adulthood in both men and women during which the reproductive capacity declines or it is lost. In terms of women, now there is a very significant physical change that takes place, and that is known as menopause. Now menopause literally means cessation of menses. Now this is a stage of stress because it has got radical adjustments that are to be made. When women experience menopause, there is decline in estrogen and there can be related psychological stress. Many people think that menopause is just like puberty, which means that it is a single event. However, it actually occurs through several years. It also has 3 stages: the premenopause stage and the perimenopausal phase and also the postmenopausal phase. Now in the premenopausal phase, the estrogen levels begins to fluctuate and they begin to decline, and it usually begins around late 30s or early 40s. Now women experience irregular menstrual periods. The ovaries are less sensitive to cyclical hormonal signals, and many women experience anovulatory cycles in which no ovum is produced. During the perimenopausal phase, this is a phase actually which can last up to 6 years before the complete cessation of menstruation. The estrogen levels decrease and the women experience more extreme variations in the timing of menstrual cycles. 75% of perimenopausal women friends also experience hot flashes. Hot flashes means sudden sensations of feeling hot. Now these can actually disrupt women's sleep, and when this happens, now there can be sleep deprivation and there can be a lot of mental confusion, difficulty with memory tasks, and there can be emotional instability for many women. The third and the final phase related to menopause in women is related to the postmenopausal phase, when actually eventually estrogen and progesterone drop to consistently low levels and the menses cease to occur altogether. Now the reduction in estrogen during the perimenopausal and postmenopausal phases also has impact on genital and other tissues. The breasts become less firm, the genital and the uterus shrink to some extent, and the vagina becomes shorter and smaller in diameter. When it comes to men, at this age there are physiological and psychological changes. Now this is the time when there is slow loss of reproductive capacity, although the rate of change varies widely from one man to another. On an average, the quantity of visible sperm produced declines slightly and begins perhaps at the age of 40. The testes also shrink very gradually and the volume of seminal fluid declines after about the age of 60. Now the decline in testosterone is implicated in the gradual loss of muscle tissue and therefore the strength. There is an increased risk of heart disease in the middle years and also the old age. It also appears that there can be impact on sexual function. Now there is, with these changes, increased incidence of poor health, obesity, and for many people we have seen that they are taking medications related to low blood pressure or high blood pressure. Another change that actually takes place in middle adulthood is loss of calcium from the bones, and this results in reduced bone mass and more brittle and porous bones. This process is known as osteoporosis. Bone loss begins at about age of 30 for both men as well as women, but in women this process is accelerated by menopause. The major consequence of this loss of bone density is a significant risk for fractures, and this begins as early as 50 for women and much later for men. And therefore we many times hear about the accidents that take place in the bathrooms and the fractures which might take place, which actually become the major cause of disability and reduced activity. Lifestyle diseases can also occur due to the daily life habits of people. Adding to the 8th and the final stage, which is the later adulthood, which is from old 65 years till the death. Now it is seen that proportions of older adults with disabilities rise with age. Nearly half of those who are above 75 they are actually experiencing some kind of difficulty related to performing daily life activities. There is also prevalence of chronic health conditions which increase with age. Most common among these conditions are hypertension, which means high blood pressure, followed by arthritis, inflammation in the joints that cause pain and stiffness. Friends, we must remember that habits from early years matter a lot. Perhaps the most crucial variable is physical exercise. There is a clear link between physical exercise and greater longevity, lower rates of diseases, for example, heart disease, cancer, osteoporosis, diabetes, gastrointestinal problems, and even arthritis. In terms of vision, now there is issue with sensory organs. In terms of hearing abilities as well, there is wear and tear that takes place on the auditory system that may result in hearing loss. Now, there are also behavioral impacts related to the physical changes. The great majority of older adults cope effectively with most everyday tasks, for example, buying groceries, managing finances, reading bus or train schedules, and so on. However, now there is a general slowing down that takes place, which is the biggest single behavioral impact of age-related changes. Everything takes longer. For example, writing things down, tying one's shoes, wearing slippers, adapting to changes in temperature, changes in light conditions, even tasks that involve word-related skills, these also decline because there is changes in the brain which are taking place, and therefore accuracy can go down with increasing age. Now, the motor functioning goes down and there is a gradual loss of sense of balance. Now, this can be attributed to the effects of aging on white matter in parts of the brain that control balance and motor functions. Therefore, many older adults who were probably quite mobile in their home environments, when they go out, they have actually difficulty in adjusting rapidly to the changing body cues and the muscular strength to maintain the body position, and these decline in old age. And therefore, many times we hear about the accidents and the falls by the older adults. Now, there is also increased dependence, newer health concerns which may require physical and psychological adjustments to changing lifestyle and decreased family income. There is increased physical dependency on others. It is tough to establish new contacts, get involved in new interests and activities, and have a recreational time. Now, physical and mental deterioration with cessation of reproductive life takes place in elderly people. Thank you.